Hey guys, it's Kay, and it's morning, so bear with me. I am not a morning person. It's like 9 a.m., but I have places to be, so I figured that this would be perfect for today. We are doing something a little bit different, but it is also something that I've been hinting at that I want to do. So we are going back into the serial killer series that I started and then never finished. Like, I think I posted one video out of the 5 that I scripted out. So we're gonna be doing a new series kind of piggybacking off of that one called Makeup and Murder. So I'm gonna be doing my makeup while discussing murder cases. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. So let's begin. So today we are going to be talking about the dating game killer, Rodney Alcala, and forgive me if I butcher some names here and there. So Rodney James Alcala was born Rodrigo Jacques Alcala Bucor on August 23rd, 1943 in San Antonio, Texas, to parents Raul Alcala Bucor and Ana Marie Gutierrez. In 1951, Rodney's father moved them to Mexico and 3 years later abandoned the family. In 1954, when he was about 11, his mother moved him and his sisters to suburban Los Angeles. In 1961, Alcala joined the Army as a clerk at age 17. And then in 1964, he went AWOL and hitchhiked from Fort Bragg to his mother's house. The Army described it as a nervous breakdown and diagnosed him with antisocial personality disorder. He was discharged on medical grounds. So Alcala actually kind of had it all. He was going to private schools and was a great student, performed well in school. His troubles really only started after joining the Army. Nobody understood how this great model student couldn't perform in the Army, and then after being discharged, he graduated from UCLA, where he studied photography, which, wow, I would love to do that. Alcala committed his first known crime in 1968. He lured an 8-year-old girl, Tali Shapiro, whose family was living in a hotel because their house had caught on fire a few miles from where Rodney Alcala lived. So he lured her into his car as she was skipping to school, and a man across the street, just a good Samaritan, witnessed this and didn't like how it looked. So he followed the car back to Alcala's house, watched him walk Tali inside, and called the police to report it. When police got to the scene, an officer actually called for backup and then knocked on the door and heard someone clearly running around inside. Then a man appears at the window, Rodney Alcala, with no clothes on and says he was in the shower. He was not dripping wet and had no towel, so the officer gave him 5 seconds to put pants on, as Alcala requested. Because, I mean, even if it's a cop, I wouldn't want to open the door naked either, right? After 10 seconds, the officer kicked the door in and found a dress, shoes, and backpack to the left, near a huge pile of blood. He ran into the bedroom to find 8-year-old Tali Shapiro, still alive, beaten, raped, and with a steel bar across her neck. At this time, Rodney ran out the back door, and the officer decided to try to save Tali's life instead of chasing him, leaving that for the backup that should arrive soon. So Tali did live, but doesn't remember anything after getting to the apartment. She said the man pulled up next to her and said he wanted to show her a picture, so she said she didn't talk to strangers and kept walking, or skipping. He pulled up to her again and said he was a friend of her parents and offered her a ride to school. She admitted she didn't really want to get in the car, but was raised not to disrespect her elders, so she got in the car. Which, I mean, that's not really what they mean when they say respect your elders, but she was only an 8-year-old girl. Alcala got away and fled to New York. He enrolled in the NYU Film School and got a job as a counselor at a New Hampshire arts camp for children under the name John Berger. In June 1971, Cornelia Michael Crilley, a 23-year-old TWA flight attendant, was found sexually assaulted and strangled in her Manhattan apartment, a case that would remain unsolved until 2011. In early 1971, the FBI actually added Alcala to the 10 most wanted fugitives list. A few months later, 2 children at the arts camp noticed his photo on the 10 most wanted list at the post office and told another teacher, who then agreed and called the FBI. Alcala was arrested and extradited to California. By that time, the Shapiro family had moved to Mexico to give Tally a better, safer life and refused to let Tally testify against Alcala. They thought it would be too traumatic for her. So because she was unable to testify, they couldn't convict him of rape or attempted murder, and prosecutors were forced to permit Alcala to plead guilty and get a lesser charge of assault. After 17 months, Alcala was paroled in 1974 under the indeterminate sentencing program. This meant Alcala would have yearly parole meetings to determine when he portrayed signs of being rehabilitated, so that they could let him go. Less than 2 months after his release, he was rearrested for assaulting a 13-year-old girl, Julie J., who had accepted a ride to school. He was paroled after 2 years of another indeterminate sentence. It was said that he had sociopathic personality traits, so convincing the parole board that he was rehabilitated came naturally to him, and is likely what allowed him to continue being let go. In 1977, after his second release, his LA parole officer unusually allowed Alcala, a repeat offender and known flight risk, to travel to New York City. Okay, so New York police now believe that a week after arriving in Manhattan, Alcala killed Ellen Jane Hoover, who was the 23-year-old daughter of the millionaire owner of popular Hollywood nightclub Ciro's. She was the goddaughter of Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr., who attended Ciro's. Her remains were found buried on the grounds of the Rockefeller estate in Westchester County. In 1978, Alcala worked at the Los Angeles Times as a typesetter and was interviewed by the Hillside Strangler Task Force as part of their investigation of sex offenders, but was ruled out as the Hillside Strangler. However, he was arrested for marijuana possession and served a brief sentence for that. In 1978, Alcala was a contestant on The Dating Game, a popular TV game show. The producers actually didn't want him to be on the show because he was creepy and gave bad vibes to them. They were actually able to convince him to allow it if two seemingly normal men were the other two contestants at that time, to kind of balance out his weirdness and bad vibes with two normal people. One of the other contestants later described him as a very strange man with bizarre opinions. Rodney Alcala actually won the competition, the date with the girl, Cheryl Bradshaw. However, she called producers later and refused to go on the date with him because she found him creepy and got vibes from him as well. So good on her, because she probably, and I hate to say this, would have been the next victim. However, Pat Brown, a criminal profiler, said that after the Dating Game appearance, he killed at least 3 women. He speculated the rejection from Cheryl may have been an exacerbating factor. During this time, Alcala walked up and down the streets convincing people he was a professional photographer and took many photos of them for his portfolio. He would ask people of all ages and walks of life. So at least he wasn't discriminating, I guess, but still. What do you think he used those photos for? I mean, if I'm thinking serial killer mentality, I would think to find his next victim. Like Bob Berdella, he used his own shop to find his victims. One of his New York Times coworkers said she remembers him sharing his photos with him and remembers one of naked girls. When she asked why he took the photos, he said their moms had asked him to. Yeah, right. She admits she thought it was weird but was young and didn't know anything. He told the people he approached he was a professional and made them think they were modeling for him. One woman who let him take her photograph in 1979 said that the portfolio included spread after spread of naked teenage boys as well. Monique Hoyt, a 15-year-old who allowed him to take her photo, was knocked unconscious and sexually assaulted while posing for a photo. On June 20th, 1979, a 12-year-old girl named Robin Samso disappeared between the beach and her ballet class. Her body was found 12 days later in the Los Angeles foothills. Samso had actually been at the beach with a friend who said a stranger approached them asking to take their pictures, even putting his hand on Robin's leg, which, red flag. The friend said no and they left. They got to her house and she gave Robin her bike to go to ballet, only to later receive a call from Robin's family asking if she had left for ballet because she never arrived at class. When detectives sent out sketches of the man, Alcala's parole officer recognized him. So they searched his mother's house and found a receipt for a storage locker in Seattle, which held mountains of evidence, including Robin's earrings, as well as earrings and jewelry from other victims. They also found thousands of photographs of potential victims. Most of the photographs are sexually explicit, and police fear some of the subjects could be other potential cold case victims. Robert Alcala was arrested in July 1979 and held without bail. In 1980, he was put on trial and convicted, sentenced to death for Robin's murder, a verdict which would later be overturned by the California Supreme Court because jurors were improperly informed of his prior sex crimes. Which, I mean, if I was on the jury and was informed, I still probably would have come out with the same verdict because that kind of only makes it worse. So I feel like that is just a slap in the face to this whole case. The fact that they tried to try him and could not because they failed to inform the jury of his past sex crimes, even though that probably still would have come out with a guilty verdict. He was put on trial again in 1986 and was convicted and sentenced to death again. See, same verdict. However, a Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals nullified the conviction. During preparation for their third prosecution in 2003, Alcala's DNA was matched to semen left at 2 rape murder scenes in Orange County, California. Then, in 2004, DNA led to the indictment of Alcala for the murders of 4 more women. 4 women were Jill Barcombe, who was 18, a New York runaway, found rolled up like a ball in an LA ravine in 1977, originally thought to be a victim of the Hillside Strangler. Georgia Wickstead, a 27-year-old, found bludgeoned in her Malibu apartment in 1977. Charlotte Lamb, a 31-year-old, found raped, strangled, and left in an El Segundo apartment complex laundry room in 1978. And Jill Parento, a 21-year-old who was killed in her Burbank apartment in 1979. Each of the bodies were posed carefully by Alcala after their murders. During incarceration between the second and third trial, he wrote a book called You, the Jury, where he claims innocence in Robin's case and suggests another victim instead. He also filed 2 lawsuits against California penal system for a slip and fall accident because they refused to give him a low-fat diet. So, I mean, I guess, you know, the whole beggars can't be choosers thing should come into play here because you're in jail. I mean, sure, if it's medically necessary, a low-fat diet is fine. In 2010, Alcala was tried for 5 murders, Robin Samso's, and the 4 new victims found as a joined charge. He acted as his own attorney in his trial. For 5 hours, he played both the role of the interrogator and witness, questioning himself as Mr. Alcala in a deep voice, then answering them. He told jurors he was at Knott's Berry Farm applying for a photography job when Robin was murdered and showed them a clip from his dating game appearance to prove the earrings were his and not Robin's. As for the other 4 charges, he said he couldn't remember killing them, which I don't know how great of an excuse that is. You can't remember killing someone, let alone 4 people you can't remember killing? That's not good. In his closing argument, he played the song Alice's Restaurant by Arlo Guthrie, where the protagonist tells a psychiatrist he wants to kill. Great choice, huh? He was convicted of all 5 counts of first-degree murder. Tali Shapiro also testified at this trial. In March 2010, Alcala was sentenced to death for a 3rd time. After his conviction, the Huntington Beach, California, and New York City police departments released 120 of Alcala's photographs, asking the public for help identifying them and whether they are potential victims. They also had about 900 photographs that could not be released to the public for identification due to the sexually explicit content of the photos. In the first few weeks after the photos were released, about 21 women identified themselves, and at least 6 families came forward to say that they recognized a loved one who disappeared years ago and was never found, which would be heartbreaking to not only have lost your loved one and they never got found, but then to find these photographs online. Then you kind of have an idea what might have happened, but you still don't really have an answer, you know what I mean? After his 2010 conviction, there were charges for a few of his other victims in New York, Washington, Wyoming, and San Francisco. But I feel like this video is probably long enough, so we'll go ahead and stop there. I just want to say thank you guys for joining me today. If you like these videos, go ahead and give me a thumbs up and or subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks for joining me.